Herman Edmond Wilder was born on December 8, 1944, and was described as a quiet man who said very little. However, when he did speak up, his family said his word carried a lot of weight. He was also known to surprise people on occasion with a funny story. He lived with his sister and her family for years, before settling in Dahlonega, Georgia, because he had family and even a girlfriend in the area. On May 25th, 56-year-old Herman, who lived alone at the Golden Hills Apartments, was found beaten and unconscious. Neighbors quickly called the police to report an assault in progress, and they arrived around 3 minutes later. Unfortunately, by that time, the attacker had fled the scene. Herman was taken to the hospital, where medical staff tried to save his life, but sadly, he died not long after from his injuries. His injuries were so severe that his brother could only identify him by a ring he wore. Investigators at the scene ruled out robbery as a motive because the attacker never took the money Herman had in his pocket. At the crime scene, they found a wooden stake, believed to be the murder weapon, and a blue baseball cap. Those items were sent off for DNA testing, and they were able to generate a profile of the suspect. Investigators already had a suspect arrested for the crime, and he was even indicted, but the new DNA results ruled him out, and the charges were ultimately dropped. The DNA profile was then uploaded to CODIS, but no matches were found. In 2023, investigators reopened the case and resubmitted preserved DNA evidence for updated analysis. Working in partnership with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation and several local agencies, detectives obtained voluntary DNA samples from persons of interest developed through renewed leads. From there, they were able to conclusively link the DNA from the murder weapon to Carol Burrell, who went by Dean. Burrell was 41 years old at the time of the murder and died in 2020. He had a documented history of mental health issues and episodes of delusional and violent behavior. Taking that into account, and the fact that there's no record that Herman and Burrell knew each other, it's believed it was just a random case of violence. Laurie Ann Powell was born to John and Joanne Compton on August 29, 1969, in Newport News, Virginia. She spent her childhood with her mother, stepfather, and sister, living in Hampton, Virginia, until 1984, when they moved to Gloucester County. In school, she was a member of the marching band and dreamed of becoming a cosmetologist. After graduating from Gloucester High School in 1987, she began working at the video store her mom ran at the Edge Hill Shopping Center. That same year, she participated in both the Miss Gloucester and Miss Teen Virginia pageants. She was also looking forward to competing in the 1988 Miss Daffodil pageant, but sadly, she would never get the chance. On the night of March 8, 1988, Laurie and her boyfriend of 3 years, Chris Cutler, were out and about when they got into a nasty argument. Upset, Laurie got out of his car and began walking along Hickory Fork Road toward Route 17. Sadly, that was the last time anyone ever saw her alive. Chris told police that after she got out of his vehicle at around 11:30 p.m., he took off. He said he returned about 40 minutes later, but Laurie was no longer there. Neighbors and workers at a nearby convenience store never saw anything out of the ordinary that night. When she failed to return home, her parents assumed she'd spent the night with a friend. However, when she failed to show up for her scheduled shift at work on March 10th, that's when panic set in, and she was quickly reported missing. Nearly a month later, on April 2nd, 1988, Laurie's nude body was discovered floating in the water near Craney Island. She had sadly been sexually assaulted and stabbed to death. Her boyfriend, Chris, was immediately considered a suspect, but with no physical evidence to tie him to the crime, he was never charged. He passed away in 2016, 9 years before his name was finally cleared. In 2025, DNA linked Alan Wade Wilmer Sr., who went by the nickname Pokey, to Laurie's murder. The previous year, DNA linked him to the death of Teresa Howell, who was murdered near Hampton, Virginia. She was last seen alive outside the Zodiac Club, at around 2:30 a.m. on July 1st, 1989. DNA also linked him to the murders of Robin Edwards and David Knobling, whose names you might recognize from my earlier coverage of the Colonial Parkway murders. That makes 4 confirmed victims linked to Wilmer so far, and investigators haven't ruled out the possibility of others, including the 6 remaining victims of the Colonial Parkway murders. Cassandra Haley and Keith Call disappeared on April 10th. Keith's car was later found abandoned on the Colonial Parkway, but neither Cassandra nor Keith was ever located. On February 3rd, 1988, the body of Brian Craig Pettinger was found tied up and partially clothed in the James River. He had last been seen after attending a party in December, and his car was later found at a shopping center. The autopsy revealed that he had suffered blunt force trauma and drowned. There are even links to the Colonial Parkway murders in Laurie's case, such as her body being found in the Elizabeth River near Craney Island, not far from where the James River meets the Hampton Roads waterways. This area is about 40 minutes from Colonial Parkway. Also, Laurie had worked as a receptionist at the same security company where Robin Edwards and Brian Pettinger's mothers worked. Unfortunately, Wilmer can never be brought to justice because he died in 2017. Regardless, investigators are still looking for witnesses to come forward regarding the other murders and possibly sightings of Wilmer in the area at the time. He was known to drive a distinctive blue 1966 Dodge Fargo pickup truck with Virginia license plate EMRAW and a large metal box in the truck's bed. He also owned a 1976 custom-built wooden boat called the Denny Wade, which allowed him to travel the area's waterways without drawing attention. During the time of the murders, he often lived on the boat and would dock at marinas in Gloucester, Middlesex, the Northern Neck, and Hampton Roads. He also operated better tree services and was a member of several local hunting clubs. Unfortunately, Wilmer's DNA was never uploaded to CODIS because of a Virginia law that requires a person's DNA to be uploaded only if they've been convicted of a felony. If you have any information that could tie Alan Wade Wilmer Sr. to other possible murders, please call the FBI at 1-800-225-5324. While Laurie's family was happy to have answers after all these years, they were saddened by the fact that her killer also took the lives of multiple other innocent individuals. Jason Scott Allen was born on May 16, 1978, in Edison, New Jersey, to Robert and Dolores Allen. When he was an infant, his family moved to Holland, Michigan, and then, 5 years later, they relocated to Zeeland, and in 1996, Jason graduated from Zeeland High School. By the age of 26, he'd remained in Zeeland and was now engaged to 22-year-old Lindsay Cutshall, a pastor's daughter who grew up in Fresno, Ohio. The two met while studying at the Appalachian Bible College in West Virginia, and within 6 weeks of meeting, they were engaged. During his time at the college, he was known as an avid outdoor adventurer who enjoyed backpacking, rock climbing, kayaking, and was a Class 5 river guide. After graduating with a bachelor's degree in Bible and a minor in Christian camping, he continued spending his summers working in Christian ministry camps, guiding rafts and counseling young people. Lindsay shared Jason's love for outdoor adventure sports and for ministry to young people. During the summer of 2004, they were serving as camp counselors and worked as whitewater rafting guides at a Christian outdoor adventure camp near Sacramento, California. In a last-minute decision following a full day of whitewater rafting with other counselors and youth, the couple decided to take a 3-day trip to the Northern California coast, hoping to enjoy a relaxing break together before their wedding. The couple had departed on Friday, August 13th, for a weekend trip with plans to return for camp on Monday morning. Their wedding was planned for just weeks away on September 11th, 2004, at Fresno Bible Church in Ohio, but sadly, the wedding would never take place. On the evening of August 14th, they set up camp in a secluded area of Fishhead Beach, near Jenner in Sonoma County. They also found a spiral notebook on the beach that was left for visitors to write something in. Lindsay wrote, and I quote, "The sun is going down on the horizon. All I see is the beams shining on the cliff face, and I know that God is awesome." Jason also wrote in the book, and I quote, "As I stir this mac and cheese, I think to myself, what a wonderful life. I've just spent 2 awesome days with my fiancée, Lindsay. Can life ever be so perfect?" Those would be the last words Jason and Lindsay ever wrote. When they failed to show up for work on Monday morning, August 16th, staff at Rock and Water called their parents. Immediately concerned, Lindsay's parents flew from Ohio the following day, and Jason's parents from Michigan on Wednesday. Lindsay's parents were in daily contact with her and knew immediately something was wrong. Once they were in California, they rushed to the camp and stayed at the home of the camp's owner, Craig Lomax, along with Jason's parents. Then on Wednesday, August 18th, everyone got the worst news of their life when a helicopter from the sheriff's department that was searching for a stranded man on a cliff discovered Jason and Lindsay's bodies on Fish Head Beach. They'd both been killed in their sleeping bags with a single close-range rifle shot. Robbery was ruled out as nothing of value was taken, and there was also no evidence of a sexual assault. Since it appeared to be a random act of violence, the case would go unsolved for the next 13 years. Then in 2017, police were called to a shooting at a home in Forestville, California. The home was shared by brothers Sean and Seamus Gallen, along with their mother. When officers arrived, they found that Sean had killed his younger brother, 36-year-old Seamus, with a rifle. After being arrested and realizing that he was probably going to jail for a long time, he decided to take the opportunity to get something off his chest. That's when he began to confess to the murders of Jason and Lindsay and shared details that only the killer could have known. He also led investigators to a soda can hidden in some brush that contained the 2 spent shell casings he collected after the shooting. As for a motive, well, Sean said he was simply upset that Jason and Lindsay were camping where they weren't supposed to, and he killed them out of spite. He said he was driving up Highway 1, upset about his own life, and when he saw them breaking the rules, it just triggered something. He also confessed to planning a gift-wrapped explosive device on the top of John Robles' car in Monterey, California. The device was meant to enact revenge on John after the two got into a bar fight years earlier, but it was John's girlfriend, Parvenay Laval, who found it instead. As she was walking to the car, she saw the gift-wrapped package resting on it, along with a note that read, "Dear friend, I've waited a long time for this." When she lifted it, the device exploded, injuring her hand, arm, and face. Thankfully, she survived. However, this was not Sean's first run-in with the law. He had a long history of erratic behavior and a long rap sheet that included a 2009 conviction for assault with a deadly weapon after he shot an arrow at a man in Gurneyville, California. On his Facebook page, he posted several photos of homemade bows and arrows, along with a picture of himself holding a spear that he'd crafted. In the end, he was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole for the murders of Jason and Lindsay, as well as the murder of his own brother. Rhoni Renee Reuter was born on September 6, 1965, in Dubuque, Iowa, and grew up in Potosi, Wisconsin. By the age of 42, she was 7 months pregnant, living in an apartment in Deerfield, Illinois. The baby's father was her boyfriend of 18 years, Sean Gale, a former Chicago Bears player and Super Bowl champion. She was expecting a baby girl and planned to name her Skylar Rain, but sadly, that day would never come. On October 4, 2007, Rhoni was found shot to death inside her home. She was shot 7 times in total. Sadly, 2 of those shots struck her in the abdomen, killing her unborn daughter. Investigators determined that the shots to the abdomen were intentional, and with no sign of forced entry, they came to the conclusion that Rhoni and her baby were the intended targets. They also learned that even though Rhoni and Sean had been together for 18 years, he'd dated numerous women over the years, including about 18 in a 3-year period. Rhoni knew Sean dated around a bit, but it's believed even she wasn't aware of the vast number of women. However, with the impending pregnancy, her family said she was hoping he would marry her and settle down a bit more. While she hadn't fully accepted his way of life, she also had no plans to leave him. Investigators then went and spoke with some of these other women and learned that they had strangely received anonymous harassing letters. They also found one of these same types of letters in Rhoni's purse after she was murdered. The letter warned about Sean's affairs, listing 16 women, and accused him of spreading STDs. One of the women mentioned in the letter was Marnie Yang, and it turns out she was Sean's latest fling. The two had even been together the night before the murder. Sean and Marnie had met around 2005 at a Chicago Bears event where she was doing security work. Marnie was a realtor, and Sean began using her for some real estate deals. However, before long, the two had become involved in a sexual relationship. Sean said the time with Marnie was very infrequent, and they typically only got together for sex 2 or 3 times a year. However, it was enough for her to become obsessed with him. When investigators spoke to coworkers of Marnie's, they said she talked about him every day and even monitored his emails. It's unclear how she obtained access, but that's also how she learned that she was just another woman on a long list of women in Sean's life. Her jealousy was becoming very unhealthy and was about to take a turn for the worse when she began using Sean's email account to spy on his life and access his addresses and details of the other women. She slowly learned that Rhoni wasn't just another woman in his life, but his actual life partner. When she learned that he was taking Rhoni on a trip to Europe, she called and canceled their hotel reservation. The more investigators looked into her, the more they realized she was likely the person behind the harassing letters. So they obtained a search warrant for her home and confiscated her computer and financial records. That's when they found mailing labels and draft letters that matched the harassing letters people had been receiving. There was also evidence that she'd been running background checks on some of the other women in Sean's life. However, this still wasn't proof of murder. Then, 4 months later, in February of 2008, investigators hoping to reignite the case brought in Marnie's psychic friend, Christy Poshen, for a follow-up interview. Clearly, something had been weighing heavily on her, and it was about to all come out. Turns out that Marnie had regularly confided in Christy, who often provided her with tarot card readings and spiritual guidance. It's unclear why Marnie trusted Christy, but maybe she thought there was some unspoken psychic client privilege. Regardless, she basically told Christy everything. She'd spent months venting about Sean and Rhoni's relationship, saying things like Rhoni didn't deserve a child. She also said she had once gone to Rhoni's apartment building with a gun, but lost her nerve at the last minute. Christy said that the night before Rhoni's murder, Marnie had slept over at her house and wanted a tarot card reading. She apparently was trying to figure out if an upcoming plan was going to be successful. The last tarot card that was turned over was interpreted as achievement of a goal. The following day, at around 9 a.m., Christy said she received a call at work from a number she didn't recognize. It was Marnie asking if she wanted to go to dinner. That call was recorded by Christy's employer and later obtained by the police. That evening at Christy's apartment, Marnie told her the shocking details. During her confession, she spoke about her disguise, about going to Rhoni's door, shooting her, and about the medical alert bracelet she took from Rhoni's wrist. She wore the bracelet as a way to inform medical staff in the case of an emergency that she was pregnant. Marnie then took Christy with her as she drove around and disposed of items she used in the murder. Some of the items were disposed of in dumpsters, but the bracelet was strangely buried outside a banquet hall. When Christy came forward and spilled the beans, she took investigators directly to the spot where it was buried. They also found information that Marnie rented a black Volkswagen the day before the murder, and the route it was driven matched the location of the crime. They also discovered that she purchased a book titled How to Make Disposable Silencers, and found that she bought materials from Home Depot to make one, and those items were later found in her home. Even with all that, they still wanted a confession, so Christy agreed to wear a wire, and in early March 2009, she got the confession they were hoping for. Rhoni was then arrested and charged with first-degree murder and intentional homicide of an unborn child. In the end, a jury found her guilty on all charges, and she was subsequently sentenced to 2 life sentences in prison. While justice was served, nothing will ever bring back Rhoni and her unborn child. Rusty Allen Riggins was born on September 3, 1966, on the U.S. Naval Base in Guantanamo, Cuba, and grew up in Lake Havasu City, Arizona, where he lived most of his life. In the mid-90s, he relocated to Flagstaff, Arizona, and by the age of 40, he'd started his own moving company called Expert Moving with his best friend and business partner. He was also married to a woman named Jessica, but the relationship was very tumultuous, and domestic violence was frequently involved. They eventually separated and filed for divorce, but before things could be finalized, a horrible tragedy occurred. On August 7, 2007, Rusty's mother, Judy, worried that she hadn't heard from her son in a couple of days, called the police and requested a welfare check at his home in the Boulder Point subdivision. When officers arrived and entered the home, they sadly found his body in the master bedroom. He'd been shot twice with a .22 caliber handgun that Jessica had bought 2 days prior, which is how long they estimated he'd been dead for. Interestingly, on the day Rusty's body was found, he and Jessica were scheduled to be in court for their divorce proceedings. Investigators immediately found this suspicious and began digging into Jessica's whereabouts before, during, and after the murder. That's when they learned that Jessica, who'd been living out of state during the separation, had dropped her children off with relatives in Missouri a few days earlier. She then drove to Flagstaff, where she initially attempted to buy a Taurus PT .22 caliber handgun at a local sporting goods store, but was unable to do so because she didn't have an ID with a local address on it. So the next day, she went to the DMV and got an identification card with Rusty's physical address on it, and was then able to buy the semi-automatic .22 caliber handgun. After the murder, Jessica stole her mother-in-law's car and drove to California to visit her ex-husband, her son, and her ex-husband's sister before crossing into Mexico. As for her Jeep Wagoner, it was found abandoned in a motel parking lot on Woodlands Village Boulevard, less than a mile from the crime scene. Thankfully, she made the mistake of trying to re-enter the United States and was immediately arrested and extradited back to Arizona to face murder charges. There was loads of evidence against her, and she wasn't hiding the fact that she committed the crime. She'd even confessed to multiple acquaintances. As for the plan leading up to the murder, she knew Rusty was still on probation after being convicted for a second time for felony domestic violence. That's the reason she wasn't worried and had planned the whole thing to look like self-defense. She claimed she only went to Rusty's house that day to talk, but he attacked her, and she accidentally shot him while trying to defend herself. However, it was discovered that she actually went to his house, hoping for an argument and possibly a violent encounter so that Rusty would violate his probation and be sent back to jail. Her plan after that was to find the $30,000 that she believed he'd stashed in the house. However, the jury didn't buy her story and believed that her plan all along was to murder Rusty, and in the end, she was found guilty of first-degree murder, theft of means of transportation, and 2 counts of credit card theft. She was then sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years.